Hi, welcome to the National Critics' Choice Online News. I'm Robin Stienberg, and welcome to my show. And today we have a very special guest, and that's none other than Mr. Alexander Smith, who's with us, and he's actually a translator and author. And he's been based in Japan for quite a while, and he's going to share with us what it takes to be a great translator. So, Alex, welcome to my show.
Thanks for having me.
And please tell us, how did you first start choosing your career as a translator, and why be a translator?
My very first translation job, professional translation job, was subtitling soap operas. Japanese, they're called home drama in Japan. And I did the subtitles for the soap operas, and those were shown on the international channel in the United States and also in a local channel in Hawaii. And I had been learning Japanese in school, and I loved storytelling in general, and I always wanted to use my knowledge of Japanese and my love for storytelling in English and put those two things together. So I thought translation of fun stories like the ones in the soap operas and in video games and novels would suit my interests well.
Wow. And while you first started out as a translator, were there any key challenges that most of aspiring translators would need to be aware of? And what are the pros and cons of being a translator? And could you also share with us the do and don'ts as well?
Sure. I know that a lot of translators or people who want to be translators just starting out are often very concerned about learning the source language. So whenever you're translating, you have a source language and a target language. In my case, my source language is Japanese and my target language is English. So I'm finding a Japanese property and translating it into English. And many translators, if you're not a native speaker of your source language, think that the most important thing to do is to learn your source language. And it's true, you do have to have very high competence in your source language. But in order to become a successful translator, you have to be very good in your target language. And that is what divides a great translator from a so-so translator. And it can make or break a career as well. If you are not proficient in English in your chosen genre, you'll find it very, very difficult to write a convincing translation, regardless of the depth of your skills in the source language. So that's a common stumbling block, I think, for many starting off translators.
And so, as a translator, and your time in Japan itself as well, it was very crucial. Could you share with us your success story as an American, for all the Americans around the world, and as well as even internationally, as an expat? They would like to know what is your secret success story behind.
Well, it's work a lot. There's really no substitution for working a lot. And when I was starting off as a translator, I worked at a Japanese game company. I was in-house, and so I did all the work that they gave me. But even while I was there, I was looking for other opportunities, finding other people who had things that needed to be translated, discovering what my niche was, because translation is such a wide field, it could really be anything. You could be translating manuals for electronics or translating stories like I do. And you have to really find your strengths and then go out and sell those strengths and find people who need those strengths. And it involves, especially in the first few years, doing a lot of work, and maybe not always for a lot of money. But putting in that time and making the connections that you need to make in order to have a successful career in the long run.
Now, speaking about successful career, and even for a very long term, in Asia or any part of the world, what should employer and translator expect from one another? Is there any key findings in this area?
Well, I think ideally the employer needs to assume that the translator is a professional translator who's supporting themselves in translation and budget accordingly. It's very true that you get what you pay for in translation, and if you are someone who has a property, say it's a game or a show or a book that you need translated, if there is somebody offering to do it for very, very cheap, you're not likely to get a very good translation, because it's a fact of the way that the business works that only a translator who is charging too little will not be able to support themselves on translation alone. Thus, it's very unlikely that a very good translator would be doing that. You do get what you pay for in translation.
And the second question is that how do Asian languages translate into English, and how does a translator smooth the way, for their employer?
So the answer to how how Asian languages translate into English is not very well. It's very difficult to do direct translations that are successful by any measure. The translator has to wear two hats. They have to wear their translation hat, and then they need to set what they've done aside and come back to it with a writer hat on, and treat the text as though it was a guided writing experiment or a guided writing effort. And so you need to bring a lot of creative skills, I think, especially with things like video games or novels, to the table in order to do justice to the original.
Mm-hmm. And how is the market for Asian children's and teen stories, translated into English today? And what kind of elements makes a translation from Asia more likely to sell in English? Are you able to give us some idea on this?
There's no one answer to that question. You really have to look at trends, what's selling in the local market overseas, and find properties that sell well or that speak to that market well. So I know that right now there's a big boom in fantasy literature in the States, and fantasy, if you've got fantasy literature in an Asian language, that's often highly marketable in the United States because it depends less on the specifics of the culture that it originated from and more on the created fantasy world. And sometimes that can be very helpful for the translator and for the marketer, because they don't need to necessarily sell the fact that it's a book from this country. They can sell the fact that it's a book about this story, and it helps them get away a bit from what might be perceived as a very niche market in the States.
What would be your three key advice for the future? This will be the last question,
Mm-hmm.
and for translators around the world, what advice would you give to them? Any parting advice? At least three, if you have.
So, one piece of advice, and this sort of repeats what I was saying earlier, but find your niche, find where you're strongest in your target language. If you've always wanted to write children's books, or you have written children's books, you may be a very good translator of children's books from other languages into English. So that's definitely strong advice. And the opposite is true too. If you have a strong interest and skills for writing children's books, and somebody wants you to translate a mystery, you need to ask yourself whether you have the skills for that or you have the interest for that, because translation can be a very long and it's a very personal process. You have to really adopt the work as your own if you're going to make a good translation. So I guess that's two sides to one coin for that piece of advice.
I think there are about two questions coming in.
Yeah.
I think we mentioned earlier, and that is, could you give us some insights on trends of translation work? What's the future trends of the translation work do you see in the future?
With increased connectivity, thanks to the internet, all signs are that there's more and more translation work available. I don't have the exact figures, but I know that all the translation associations are swelling, the ranks are swelling. There's a lot more work out there for translators and interpreters as well. So the prognosis is very good if you're interested in becoming a translator and you have the skills to make yourself known in a field.
What's next for you? Are you planning to translate any books on your own?
Well, I've started a publishing company with two partners 2 years ago, and we have 3 books out, and we'll have another 5 books out this year. That's Bento Books, and it's a bit of an experiment to see what publishing, translator-driven publishing can accomplish. Instead of a publisher, say in the United States, finding a title and hiring a translator and publishing it, we are finding our own titles, contacting the rights holders in Japan, and translating them themselves or with our oversight, and then publishing them themselves. And so it's a new model for translation, and one that I hope will work and can be duplicated elsewhere as well.
Well, once again, before we go, we'd like to thank our viewers for watching this episode. And how can our viewers keep in contact with your organization or yourself? Is there any website?
Yeah, there's 2 websites. Kajiya Productions, Kajiya Productions.com is my translation company, and bentobooks.com, it's bentobooks.com, is the place for my publishing, and you can read about stuff that I've done and stuff that we're doing at Bento Books there. And you can also talk to me on Twitter. I'm at Mark Aokajiya, Aokajiya.
Once again, thank you for joining us here at the National Critics' Choice. And viewers, I'm Robin Steinberg. Thank you for joining me here at the National Critics' Choice. Till we see you again, have a good week ahead.
Thank you very much.